Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode. I know many of you use these videos to help you sleep, so before we begin, I thought it would be fun for everyone to say hello and leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your engagement really makes this channel special. And hey, if you enjoy getting your nightly dose of thrills and chills with us, why not hit that subscribe button below? It's the best way to never miss out on the latest terrifying tales. So kick back, relax, and let's get started. The campfire crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the faces huddled around it. My friends, faces flushed with exertion and laughter from the day's hike, were swapping ghost stories, each more outlandish than the last. I shivered, not from the cool mountain air, but from a prickling unease that had settled in my gut since we arrived at this remote campsite. The park ranger had been hesitant to let us in, muttering something about increased wildlife activity near Shadow Lake, the very lake our map declared was the best swimming spot. But we were teenagers, invincible in our naivety, and brushed him off. Now, as night pressed in, the dense forest surrounding the lake seemed to hold its breath, an unnatural stillness punctuated only by the occasional, unsettling snap of a twig. Suddenly, Sarah, perched closest to the fire, froze. Her eyes, wide with a primal terror, locked on something just beyond the tree line. We followed her gaze, hearts hammering against our ribs. There, in the inky blackness, stood a figure. Tall and gaunt, it seemed to blend with the shadows, its form flickering and shifting. It was human-shaped, vaguely, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an impossible angle. A low, guttural growl emanated from the darkness, sending shivers down my spine. Panic erupted. Sarah shrieked and bolted towards the tent, the rest of us scrambling after her. But as I fumbled with the zipper, a cold, fetid breath washed over me. I whipped around, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The creature was upon us, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow, reflecting the firelight. It let out a blood-curdling shriek, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. We piled into the flimsy tent, the thin nylon a pathetic barrier against whatever lurked outside. Claws scraped against the fabric, a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard, amplified 1,000-fold. The tent walls billowed and strained with each desperate swipe. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears hot on my cheeks, the sound of my friend's ragged breaths the only comfort in this suffocating terror. Then, with a sickening rip, the tent gave way. A skeletal hand, impossibly long and tipped with black, gnarled claws, reached inside. My scream died in my throat as the hand grasped my ankle. I thrashed, adrenaline surging through me, but its grip was ironclad. A blood-curdling shriek, unlike anything I'd ever heard, pierced the night. The creature recoiled, its hand releasing my ankle. A blinding flash erupted, followed by the deafening crack of a gunshot. The unearthly shrieks continued, but they were fading, retreating deeper into the forest. Silence. A heavy, oppressive silence descended. We huddled together, shivering, long after the last horrifying echo had died away. Dawn found us, pale and haggard, packing up our camp in a frantic frenzy. We didn't speak of what we saw that night, the memory of Brand seared into our minds. The tranquility of the forest was forever shattered, replaced by an unspeakable dread. We left Shadow Lake behind, the dark water reflecting a horror we could never forget, a chilling reminder that some things are best left undisturbed. The bus rattled to a stop, kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured the ramshackle sign, Camp Blackwood. My unease started subtle, a prickle on the back of my neck that intensified as I shouldered my backpack and stepped off. The other campers, a mishmash of teenagers, milled about, their chatter swallowed by the oppressive silence of the surrounding woods. The camp itself wasn't much, a collection of mismatched cabins clustered around a murky lake that reeked faintly of something rotten. Mr. Blackwood, the owner, was a wiry man with eyes that seemed to hold secrets older than the gnarled trees. He gave us a curt rundown of the rules, his voice raspy like dead leaves. No fires past dusk, stay on marked trails, and whatever you do, don't venture near the abandoned cabins at the north end of the lake. The first night, a low, mournful wail echoed across the water. It started faint, then grew in intensity, sending shivers down my spine. The counselors dismissed it as a coyote, but the sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, laced with a chilling desperation. Sleep was a luxury the forest refused to grant. Unease gnawed at me, and every rustle of leaves sent my heart hammering. On the third night, I woke to a sound like dragging nails on wood, coming from outside my cabin. Panic choked me as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam revealing nothing but the oppressive darkness beyond the thin window. Days blurred into nights. The oppressive silence felt like a living entity, punctuated only by the mournful wails. My friends, initially boisterous, grew quiet and withdrawn. One morning, Sarah, the life of the party, was missing. We found her backpack near the abandoned cabins at the north end of the lake, its contents scattered like the victim of a struggle. Fear, cold and primal, clawed its way up my throat. That night, desperate to escape the growing dread, I snuck out of my cabin. The air hung heavy, the silence broken only by the incessant drone of cicadas. As I neared the abandoned cabins, a sickeningly sweet, floral scent filled the air. The buildings loomed before me, windows boarded shut, paint peeling like scaps. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, I pressed my ear against a cracked board. A rhythmic thumping came from within, accompanied by a low, guttural moan. Panic seized me. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a protruding root. I fell, the sound echoing in the deathly stillness. A floorboard creaked above me. A monstrous figure emerged from the darkness of the cabin, skeletal, impossibly tall, its skin stretched taut over bone. Its eyes, black pits devoid of light, locked on mine. My scream died in my throat as its elongated fingers, tipped with long, curved claws, reached for me. The next morning, the other campers found me back at the main cabin, babbling incoherently. Mr. Blackwood's eyes, when they met mine, held a flicker of something, pity, relief. He drove me back to town, leaving the rest of the group behind at Camp Blackwood, a place where the silence whispered secrets and the darkness held horrors unseen. The bus rumbled to a stop, spewing dust and a weary group of us teenage campers into the unsettling quiet of Blackwood Pines. It wasn't the usual summer camp cheer. The towering pines, choked with a thick canopy, seemed to hold their breath as we disembarked. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else. A metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine. Old Man Blackwood, the camp owner, shuffled out to greet us. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes two cloudy marbles peering out from beneath a greasy Stetson. His welcome speech was a mumble of warnings: stay on the trails, no swimming in the murky lake, and under no circumstances wander near the boarded-up cabins at the forest's edge. The cabins, he rasped, held memories best left undisturbed. The first night, a low growl echoed through the trees, sending goosebumps erupting on my skin. It wasn't an animal sound, it was mournful, laced with a chilling desperation. The counselors, a group of nervous college kids, dismissed it as a bear, but the sound lingered in my dreams, a chilling premonition. Days bled into one another. The oppressive silence of the woods was broken only by the mournful growls and the unsettling feeling of being watched. One by one, the carefree spirit of the campers dwindled. Laughter died down, replaced by a gnawing fear. Then, Sarah vanished. 1 minute she was laughing by the campfire, the next, her chair was empty. A search party was organized, their frantic calls swallowed by the dense woods. They found her backpack near the forbidden cabins, ripped open, its contents scattered like the remnants of a struggle. Panic, cold and raw, settled in my gut. That night, sleep was a distant dream. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart into overdrive. Driven by a desperate need to escape the mounting terror, I slipped out of my cabin. The air hung heavy, the silence broken only by the incessant drone of crickets. As I neared the forbidden cabins, the metallic tang in the air grew stronger, thick enough to taste. The cabins loomed before me, skeletal figures bathed in moonlight. Peeking through a cracked board, I saw movement. A grotesque silhouette shifted within, its long, spindly limbs contorting in a horrific ballet. Then, a sound that curdled my blood, a wet, rhythmic slurping, punctuated by a low guttural moan. My breath caught in my throat. Panic surged through me as a floorboard creaked above. A monstrous hand, pale and skeletal, with impossibly long, black claws, burst through the rotting roof. It descended towards me, the stench of decay overpowering. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root. I fell, the sound echoing in the deathly stillness. But for once, the silence wasn't broken. No monstrous descent, no guttural moans. Only the rhythmic chirping of crickets. I lay there, paralyzed with terror, until the first rays of dawn painted the sky. Back at the main cabin, I babbled incoherently. Old man Blackwood, however, wasn't surprised. His cloudy eyes held a flicker of something. Pity? Acceptance? He bundled me into his rusty truck, driving me back to civilization. As I left Blackwood pines in the rearview mirror, the silence of the woods seemed to follow, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the edge of sight, waiting for the next unsuspecting camper. The GPS sputtered and died, a casualty of the ever-thickening canopy. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool mountain air. "We should be there any minute," I said, more to reassure myself than my two friends, Emily and Alex. Their initial excitement about a weekend of backcountry camping had waned with each missed turn and overgrown trail. We'd opted for a remote location, lured by the promise of solitude and pristine wilderness. Now, the towering pines seemed to close in, casting long, skeletal shadows in the fading light. The silence was broken only by the insistent chirping of crickets and the unsettling snap of a twig under an unseen weight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a clearing. Relief washed over me as I saw a weathered wooden sign, its inscription barely visible, Camp Blackwood EST 1898. The camp itself was a collection of ramshackle cabins huddled around a dark, still lake. A sense of unease settled in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. A wiry old man with eyes like faded denim emerged from one of the cabins. This was Mr. Blackwood, the camp caretaker. His welcome was curt, punctuated by warnings about staying on marked trails and avoiding the crumbling eyesores at the north end of the lake. He spoke in hushed tones about things best left undisturbed, sending shivers down my spine. That night, huddled around a crackling fire, we tried to shake off the unsettling vibes. But as darkness descended, a low, mournful wail echoed across the water. It wasn't a wolf or coyote, something far more primal and despairing. The counselors, a group of nervous teenagers, dismissed it as a nocturnal bird, but sleep wouldn't come. The wail continued throughout the night, a chilling lullaby that sent chills down my spine. Days blurred into one another. The oppressive silence hung heavy, punctuated only by the mournful cries and the gnawing fear that seemed to permeate the very air. One by one, the carefree spirit of the campers dwindled. Laughter died down, replaced by jumpy glances and whispered anxieties. Then, Sarah, a bubbly girl with an infectious laugh, vanished. A search party was organized, their frantic calls swallowed by the dense woods. They found her backpack near the forbidden cabins at the north end of the lake, its contents ripped open and scattered like panicked offerings. Panic, raw and primal, clawed its way up my throat. That night, driven by a desperate need to understand Sarah's disappearance and fueled by a morbid curiosity, I snuck out of my cabin. The air hung heavy, the metallic tang from the first night now thick enough to taste. As I neared the forbidden cabins, a sense of dread threatened to consume me. The cabins themselves were grotesque caricatures of human habitation, their windows boarded up, paint peeling like scaps. A low, rhythmic thudding echoed from one of the cabins, accompanied by a guttural, wet slurping sound that sent my stomach churning. Ignoring the primal scream urging me to flee, I pressed my ear against a cracked board. The stench of decay hit me like a physical blow. Then, a glimpse. A long, skeletal arm, tipped with impossibly long, black claws, reached out from a gaping hole in the floor above. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, tripped over a protruding root, and fell with a sickening thud. The sound echoed through the clearing, a death knell in the oppressive silence. But there was no monstrous descent, no guttural moans. Only the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Heart hammering in my chest, I scrambled to my feet and raced back to the camp. The counselors were gone, replaced by a chilling note left by Mr. Blackwood. They were warned. You weren't. Dawn found me huddled by the lake, shivering and babbling incoherently. Mr. Blackwood, with a flicker of something akin to pity in his cloudy eyes, drove me back to civilization. The horrors I witnessed at Camp Blackwood remain etched in my memory. But the true terror lies not in the monstrous entities that lurk in the shadows, but in the unsettling realization that some warnings are best heeded. The silence of the woods still haunts me, a constant reminder of the secrets that lie hidden just beyond the edge of civilization, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon them. The rusted sign, barely clinging to a crooked post, announced our arrival. Blackwater Creek, established 1937. We, a group of 5 college friends on a long-awaited camping trip, piled out of the car, optimism battling a creeping unease. The silence was unnerving, no birdsong, no rustling leaves, just a thick, oppressive quiet that seemed to swallow sound whole. The campsite itself was a desolate affair. Weathered wooden cabins huddled together like frightened children, their peeling paint and broken windows radiating a sense of neglect. A muddy path led down to a stagnant creek, its surface reflecting the dying light in a sickly, oil-slick sheen. Our initial excitement waned as we set up camp. Mark, the jokester of the group, fell uncharacteristically silent, his usual humor replaced by a nervous twitch. As dusk settled, casting long, skeletal shadows from the surrounding trees, the silence became a physical entity, pressing down on us. Then came the whispers. At first, faint and indistinguishable, they seemed to emanate from the dense woods. As the night deepened, the whispers grew louder, forming a chilling chorus that spoke in a language that felt ancient and wrong. It wasn't a language of words, but of raw emotions, despair, anger, a hunger that made my skin crawl. Sleep was a distant dream. Each rustle of leaves sent jolts of terror through me. The flimsy walls of our cabin did little to dispel the growing sense of dread. In the small hours of the morning, a figure brushed against the window, leaving behind a smear of something cold and viscous. The whispers grew frantic, reaching a fever pitch before abruptly falling silent. The next morning, we found Sarah, one of our friends, sleepwalking. Her eyes were vacant, her face a mask of terror. She mumbled incoherently about the watchers and the endless hunger. Panic gnawed at me. This wasn't a regular camping trip, something was terribly wrong. We decided to leave, a decision fueled by a mix of fear and a desperate need for normalcy. But Blackwater Creek had a grasp on us. As we packed up, a sickening stench filled the air. We traced it to a hidden clearing deep within the woods. There, nestled between gnarled trees, lay the skeletal remains of what once might have been campers. The whispers returned, louder than ever, swirling around us. Then, from the edge of the clearing, emerged figures. Tall and gaunt, their skin stretched taut over their bones, they moved with an unsettling fluidity. Their eyes, burning red embers set against inky blackness, locked onto us. The stench intensified, a cocktail of decay and something I couldn't place. We ran. Blind terror propelled us forward, the tangled undergrowth ripping at our clothes, the whispers clawing at our sanity. I didn't look back, afraid of what I might see. We burst out of the treeline, stumbling into a clearing bathed in the golden light of dawn. Behind us, the silence was deafening. We didn't stop running until we reached the main road, collapsing in a heap, gasping for breath. We never spoke of the horrors we'd witnessed at Blackwater Creek, the memory too potent, too terrifying. But the whispers sometimes echo in my dreams, a chilling reminder of the hungry darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of the civilized world. Years have passed, but the experience has left an indelible mark. The woods, once a source of solace, now represent a place of unknown terror. And sometimes, when the wind howls outside my window, I swear I can hear a faint, distant whisper, carrying a message I'd rather not understand. The ranger, a grizzled man with eyes as opaque as the murky lake behind him, shuffled a worn map across the counter. Blackwood Falls, he rasped, his voice like dry leaves crunching underfoot. Beautiful spot, but stick to the marked trails. Some things are best left undisturbed. We, a group of 4 seasoned backpackers, brushed off his warning with a smirk. Little did we know, the silence of Blackwood Falls held a far more sinister truth. We set off with youthful exuberance, the dense forest air thick and sweet with the scent of pine. But as the sun dipped below the canopy, shadows stretched long and menacing. An unsettling quiet hung heavy, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig under an unseen weight. The promised beautiful spot turned out to be a desolate clearing with a cluster of abandoned cabins, their windows like vacant eyes staring into the encroaching dusk. Unease simmered in my gut, but we pressed on, pitching our tent under a skeletal oak that seemed to claw at the twilight sky. As night fell, the silence intensified, punctuated by a low, mournful wail that echoed through the trees. The counselors, barely older than us themselves, claimed it was just a coyote, but the sound sent shivers down my spine, a primal cry that spoke of ancient sorrow. Sleep eluded me. Every rustle of leaves sent my heart into overdrive. In the dead of night, a horrifying scratching sound came from the outside of the tent. Panic clawed at my throat. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness to reveal nothing. Just when I started to breathe a sigh of relief, a cold, damp hand pressed against the thin nylon wall of the tent. The scream died in my throat as terror choked me. The hand retreated just as abruptly as it appeared, leaving behind a slimy, acrid-smelling residue. The next morning, sleep-deprived and shaken, we discovered a single, mangled bird feather at the base of the oak tree. Its vivid blue shimmered against the damp earth, a stark contrast to the oppressive grays and browns of the forest. Days blurred into one another. The oppressive silence, broken only by the mournful cries, wore down our spirits. One by one, the carefree camaraderie evaporated, replaced by a gnawing fear and a growing suspicion that we were being watched. Then, Emily, a bubbly redhead who was always the life of the party, vanished. A desperate search party yielded nothing but her crumpled backpack near a crumbling stone structure at the edge of the clearing, a structure not marked on the map. Panic, raw and primal, clawed its way up my throat. That night, fueled by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand, I snuck out of the camp. The metallic tang from the first night was thick enough to taste now, every breath scraping my lungs like sandpaper. Reaching the stone structure, I found an inscription etched above the doorway, "Blackwood's Gate, enter at your own peril." Ignoring the warning, I pushed open the heavy, groaning door. The stench inside was indescribable, a putrid miasma that threatened to overwhelm me. A dim, flickering light emanated from within, casting grotesque shadows on the damp stone walls. Then, a guttural moan echoed through the chamber, followed by a shuffling sound. Terror paralyzed me as a monstrous figure emerged from the darkness. Impossibly tall and emaciated, its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame, it moved with an unnatural grace. Luminous blue eyes, like malevolent embers, burned within its skull-like face. It let out a blood-curdling shriek, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. I turned to flee, but the heavy oak door had slammed shut behind me with a sickening thud. The creature lunged, its long, skeletal arms reaching for me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, but it never came. Instead, I heard a deafening crack of thunder, followed by a blinding flash of light. When I opened my eyes, the creature was gone. Dust motes swirled in the dim light filtering through a crack in the ceiling. Disoriented and trembling, I stumbled out of the structure and back to camp. By morning, the camp was deserted. The only sign of life was a note on the crumpled map, left by the ranger. They were warned. You weren't alone. I stumbled back to the road, the whispers of the forest clawing at my sanity. Back in civilization, the nightmares began. Dreams of skeletal figures with blue eyes haunted my sleep. Some things, the ranger had said, are best left undisturbed. Now, I carry that warning as a constant reminder of the horrors that lurk in the silent depths of Blackwood Falls. The experience left me a changed person. The woods, once a source of solace and adventure, now represent a place of chilling dread. Social gatherings and crowded spaces offered a temporary shield, but the solitude of my apartment often brought the whispers back. They were faint echoes now, fragmented and elusive, but enough to send shivers down my spine. One day, while browsing the internet, I stumbled upon a cryptic forum dedicated to the unexplained. A thread titled "Blackwood Falls, Don't Go There" caught my eye. My heart hammered in my chest as I read through the chilling accounts. Each story mirrored my own, detailing encounters with monstrous figures, haunting whispers, and a bone-deep fear that clung to them long after escape. A user named Crowkeeper stood out. They claimed to be a local historian with knowledge of the area's dark past. In a private message, Crowkeeper revealed a chilling truth. Blackwood Falls was once the site of a mining settlement, its inhabitants consumed by greed and a lust for a rare, luminous blue mineral. Their hunger grew insatiable, leading them to commit unspeakable acts. Eventually, a cave-in sealed their fate, entombing them in their cursed hunger within the earth. Crowkeeper urged me to return to Blackwood Falls, not to confront the horrors, but to perform a ritual to appease the restless spirits. He provided detailed instructions, but the thought of returning to that place of nightmares filled me with dread. Weeks turned into months, the whispers in my dreams growing louder, more insistent. One night, they became a cacophony, punctuated by the blood-curdling shriek of the creature. Driven to the brink, I knew I had to act. Packing a backpack with the necessary supplies, I felt a sense of grim determination. Returning to Blackwood Falls was terrifying, but the alternative, a lifetime tormented by the whispers, was worse. The familiar dread washed over me as I stepped into the oppressive silence of the forest. Following Crowkeeper's instructions, I navigated to the crumbling stone structure. The inscription above the doorway mocked me, "Blackwood's Gate, enter at your own peril." Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open, the stench of decay assaulting me once more. Following a labyrinthine passage carved into the rock, I reached a vast cavern. A sickly, blue light emanated from the heart of the cavern, revealing skeletal figures clawing at the walls, their eyes burning with an unnatural blue glow. Their guttural moans filled the chamber, a chorus of insatiable hunger. Terror threatened to consume me, but I forced myself forward, channeling Crowkeeper's instructions. With trembling hands, I completed the ritual, the cavern echoing with an unearthly hum. The blue light flickered and died, replaced by a heavy silence. A sense of peace, fragile yet undeniable, settled upon the chamber. The skeletal figures crumbled to dust, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone. Exiting the cavern, I stumbled back to the road, the whispers finally silenced. Blackwood Falls held no more terror for me, only a grim sense of closure. But the experience left an indelible mark. I carry the memory of that place and the horrors it held as a constant reminder: some warnings are best heeded, and some places are better left undisturbed. The rusted sign, barely clinging to a tilting post, proclaimed Crowley's Peak, hike at your own risk. We, a group of 4 friends, myself, the ever-optimistic leader, Sarah, the pragmatic voice of reason, Michael, the jokester, and Emily, the quiet observer, ignored the ominous warning, fueled by youthful arrogance and a thirst for adventure. The trail leading up Crowley's Peak was more of a treacherous scramble. Dense foliage swallowed the meager sunlight, casting the path in an unnatural twilight. An oppressive silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves under our boots. As we climbed, the air grew colder, and a thin layer of mist clung to the decaying vegetation, making it feel like we were stepping into a forgotten world. By nightfall, we reached a plateau, a desolate expanse with a chilling wind that seemed to whisper secrets through the skeletal branches of gnarled trees. An old, weathered wooden cabin stood alone in the clearing, its peeling paint and crooked chimney radiating an unsettling aura. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, it offered the only shelter, an exhaustion won out over trepidation. Inside, the cabin was dusty and cobweb-strewn. A single, flickering lantern cast grotesque shadows on the walls. A sense of unease settled in my gut, but we built a fire in the rusty stove and huddled together for warmth. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by nightmares of unseen figures watching us from the darkness. The next morning, we discovered a single, blood-stained feather near the cabin door. It was an unnatural black, the color of a raven's wing, and sent a shiver down my spine. We pressed on, determined to conquer the peak, the feather a dark omen we tried to ignore. As we climbed, the whispers started. At first, faint and indistinguishable, they seemed to emanate from the dense woods. But with each step, they grew louder, a chilling chorus of voices speaking in a language that felt ancient and wrong. Panic gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Sarah, usually the calm one, looked pale and terrified. Suddenly, Michael, who was leading the way, screamed and vanished into a patch of thick fog that had rolled in unexpectedly. We called his name, but there was only an unnerving silence. Fear, icy and raw, gripped our hearts. Terror fueled our flight. We stumbled down the treacherous slopes, the whispers chasing us like a pack of hungry wolves. Emily tripped and fell, twisting her ankle badly. We couldn't leave her behind, but Sarah, ever the level-headed one, saw a small, barely discernible path branching off the main trail. It offered a chance, however slim. The path plunged deeper into the dark heart of the forest. The fog grew thicker, obscuring everything but a few feet ahead. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent us scrambling for cover. Then, in the distance, we saw flickering lights. Hope surged through me, a fragile flame amidst the suffocating fear. The lights led us to a ramshackle outpost, its windows glowing with a warm orange light. An old woman with eyes like chips of obsidian peered at us through the cracked window. She reluctantly let us in, but her welcome was cold and suspicious. She spoke little, but the fear in her eyes mirrored our own. For several days, we were held captive in the outpost. The old woman revealed the horrors of Crowley's Peak. The whispers, she said, were the voices of those who had perished on the mountain, their souls forever trapped, forever hungry. The black feathers, she warned, were a sign of the Crow men, malevolent entities that served as guardians of the mountain's dark secrets. One night, a guttural screech echoed across the clearing. The old woman bolted the door, her face drained of color. Moments later, a flurry of black feathers rained down on the roof, followed by the sound of clawing at the wooden door. We huddled together, fear paralyzing us. Dawn brought a reprieve. The old woman revealed a hidden passage that led away from the mountain. It was treacherous, she warned, but our only hope of escape. We thanked her, our gratitude laced with unease, and ventured into the unknown. The hidden passage was a claustrophobic nightmare. We crawled through tunnels barely big enough for a single person, the air thick and stale. But the thought of the Crow men spurred us forward. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we emerged from the darkness, blinking in the bright sunlight. We stumbled out onto a familiar road, miles away from Crowley's Peak. Exhausted and shaken, we flagged down a passing car, the horrors of the mountain clinging to us like a second skin. News reports later confirmed Michael's disappearance. Search parties found nothing but a single black feather near the spot where he vanished. The authorities concluded it was an unfortunate accident, lost hiker victim to the treacherous terrain. We knew better. Back in the safety of civilization, the nightmares continued. The whispers, once faint, now echoed through my dreams, filled with a chilling hunger. Sarah, plagued by guilt over Michael's death, spiraled into depression. Even Emily, usually the most reserved, developed a nervous twitch and an aversion to all things dark and secluded. We tried to move on, but the experience on Crowley's Peak had irrevocably changed us. Months later, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a worn leather-bound journal and a note scrawled in the old woman's hand, "The mountain remembers. The whispers will not cease." The journal was filled with cryptic entries, detailing ancient rituals and warnings about the Crow men. It spoke of a way to appease the restless spirits and silence the whispers, but the rituals were dark, seemingly bordering on the demonic. Fear warred with a desperate need for peace. Could we truly banish the horrors we'd unleashed on ourselves, or were we simply damning ourselves further? I shared the journal with Sarah and Emily. The initial fear gave way to a grim determination. We couldn't live the rest of our lives plagued by nightmares and whispers. We couldn't let Michael's death be in vain. The preparations were arduous. Rare ingredients, gathered with utmost secrecy, bled us dry financially and emotionally. The ritual itself, performed under a full moon at the base of Crowley's Peak, was a chilling mix of chanting, animal sacrifices, and offerings left for the Crow men. The night was alive with malevolent energy, the whispers reaching a crescendo before abruptly falling silent. The air grew thick and metallic, the ground trembling beneath our feet. A swarm of ravens descended, their black forms blotting out the moon. Terror threatened to consume me, but then, slowly, light returned. The ravens dispersed, and an unsettling calm settled over the mountain. We left Crowley's Peak before dawn, not daring to look back. The whispers were gone, replaced by an eerie silence. Back in our separate lives, we tried to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. The nightmares, although less frequent, still lingered, a constant reminder of our brush with darkness. We made a pact never to speak of the horrors we witnessed. But the knowledge that Crowley's Peak held secrets best left undisturbed, and that the Crow men still watched with their obsidian eyes, remained a chilling truth we'd carry with us to our graves. The flyer promised secluded serenity and untouched wilderness. What it didn't advertise was the bone-deep unease that settled in my gut as I surveyed Camp Blackwood. The sun dipped below the tree-line, casting long, skeletal shadows across the dilapidated cabins that huddled together like frightened children. A thick silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the insistent chirping of crickets and the unsettling snap of a twig under an unseen weight. Ignoring the prickling of unease, I joined my friends, the ever-optimistic leader, Mark, the perpetually sarcastic Sarah, and the quiet observer, Emily. We set up camp, the flickering fire casting grotesque shadows on our faces. The air itself felt thick, carrying the faint metallic tang of decay. As darkness devoured the last sliver of light, a low, mournful wail echoed across the lake, a sound unlike any animal call I'd ever heard. Sleep was a fragile visitor. Every rustle of leaves sent jolts of terror through me. In the dead of night, I awoke to a blood-curdling scream. Sarah. We found her outside her tent, babbling incoherently, her eyes wide with terror. She spoke of shadowy figures that stalked the woods, their eyes burning like malevolent embers. We brushed it off as a nightmare, a product of the unsettling atmosphere. The following days were a blur of oppressive silence punctuated by the mournful wails that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. One by one, our carefree spirit evaporated, replaced by a gnawing fear and a growing certainty that we were not alone. Then, Mark vanished. One minute he was chopping firewood, the next, simply gone. His axe lay abandoned on the chopping block, a single, dark stain blooming on the wood. Panic clawed its way up my throat. We were trapped in a nightmare, the woods around us closing in, the silence pressing down like a physical weight. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate hope of finding Mark, I decided to explore the perimeter of the camp, ignoring Sarah and Emily's pleas to stay put. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the metallic tang in the air grew stronger. The silence was broken only by the incessant drone of unseen insects. Then, I stumbled upon a clearing. In its center stood a towering, gnarled oak, its branches clawing at the twilight sky. Beneath its skeletal frame lay a sight that turned my blood to ice, a pile of bleached bones, picked clean and arranged in a grotesque parody of a human figure. Terror propelled me backwards. I tripped, crashing through the undergrowth. Disoriented and scrambling to my feet, I bumped into something solid. A low growl rumbled through the clearing. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Slowly, I turned, the last sliver of daylight revealing a monstrous figure. Tall and emaciated, its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame, it moved with an unnatural grace. Luminous red eyes, like malevolent embers, burned from within its skull-like face. It let out a blood-curdling shriek, a sound that ripped through the silence and tore at the very fabric of reality. I turned to flee, but it was too late. The creature lunged, its long, skeletal arms reaching for me. Just as I braced for impact, a deafening crack of thunder split the sky, followed by a blinding flash of light. Disoriented, I blinked, the creature gone. Only the stench of decay and the oppressive silence remained. Stumbling back to camp, I found it deserted. A single tattered note lay on Sarah and Emily's abandoned tent. They were warned. "You weren't." Dawn found me on the side of the road, shivering and babbling incoherently. News reports later confirmed Mark and the other disappearances from Camp Blackwood, attributing them to a tragic hiking accident. Years later, the nightmares still plague me. Dreams of skeletal figures with red eyes and the stench of decay linger like unwelcome guests. Camp Blackwood remains a festering wound on my memory, a chilling reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed, and some silences are far more terrifying than any scream. The hand-painted sign, peeling and faded, proclaimed Whispering Pines Campground Escape the Everyday. Escape, we thought, was exactly what we needed. Me, Sarah, my ever-reliable best friend, and the new couple, Tom and Emily, a breath of fresh air with their infectious optimism. Little did we know, Whispering Pines held a far more sinister kind of escape. The campground itself was unsettling. Sparsely populated, the few campers we saw kept to themselves, their eyes darting nervously at us as we unloaded. The towering pines seemed to huddle close, their branches scraping against each other in an endless, mournful sigh. A constant low hum vibrated through the air, a sound that sent shivers down my spine despite the summer heat. As we set up camp, a thick, metallic tang clung to the air. Ignoring the growing sense of unease, we built a fire, its meager light swallowed by the encroaching darkness. The low hum intensified, joined now by a faint whispering sound, like disembodied voices carried on the breeze. Sleep was a distant dream, punctuated by the unsettling chorus of whispers and the feeling of unseen eyes watching us from the dense forest. Morning brought a hollow sense of relief. But that feeling vanished when we discovered a crude, hand-carved wooden doll hanging from a low branch near Sarah's tent. It was disturbingly lifelike, its tiny body twisted into a pose of silent scream, its button eyes reflecting an unnatural glint in the sunlight. Sarah, usually the voice of reason, went pale, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. The whispers grew louder, bolder, now forming distinct words in an unknown language that sent primal shivers down my spine. Tom, ever the pragmatist, dismissed them as wind playing tricks, but the unease in his eyes betrayed his words. Emily, usually bubbly and upbeat, grew withdrawn, her smile strained. The following night, the whispers intensified, punctuated by a blood-curdling scream. We rushed to Tom and Emily's tent, only to find it empty. Frantic, we searched the surrounding woods, the whispers swirling around us, mocking our fear. Then, in a clearing bathed in an unnatural, sickly green light, we found them. Their lifeless bodies were arranged in a grotesque parody of a peaceful embrace. Their faces were contorted in silent screams, their eyes wide open and glazed over. They looked as though they had died of pure, unadulterated terror. We fled, the whispers chasing us like hungry wolves, the green light burning into my retinas. We stumbled back to the car, our movements fueled by blind terror. The forest seemed to close in on us, the trees becoming skeletal fingers reaching out to grab us. We didn't dare look back, the image of Tom and Emily's lifeless bodies seared into our minds. Back in civilization, the nightmares began. The whispers echoed through my dreams, punctuated by chilling images of the green light and the twisted doll. Sarah, plagued by survivor's guilt, became a recluse. The guilt gnawed at me too, a constant reminder of our failed attempt to save our friends. Months later, a package arrived at my doorstep. Inside was the wooden doll, its button eyes seeming to bore into my soul. A scrap of paper fluttered to the floor, a single chilling sentence scrawled on it: "The whispers never truly fade." Now, years later, the whispers still linger at the edges of my consciousness, a constant reminder of the horror we witnessed at Whispering Pines. The metallic tang seems to permeate even the cleanest air, and the sight of a dense forest sends a tremor through me. Some escapes, I've learned, are best left unachieved. Whispering Pines, with its secrets and its whispers, remains a chilling testament to that terrifying truth. The flickering gas lantern cast grotesque shadows on the peeling paint of the old ranger cabin. Outside, the wind howled like a banshee through the skeletal pines of Blackwood Forest. We, a group of experienced backpackers, myself, the ever-optimistic leader, Maya, the stoic survivalist, and Ben, the amateur photographer with a morbid curiosity, had ignored the warnings scratched onto the rusted sign at the trailhead: "Turn back. Danger." The ranger station, perched precariously on the edge of a sheer cliff, was supposed to be a temporary haven during a sudden downpour. But as the storm raged outside, a different kind of unease settled in. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional creak of the decaying structure and the unsettling rhythm of dripping water. Later that night, while rummaging through old maps and forgotten supplies, I stumbled upon a leather-bound journal. The faded handwriting spoke of a reclusive hermit living deep within the forest, rumored to possess dark knowledge and commune with malevolent spirits. It mentioned strange lights in the woods at night and a bone-chilling silence that preceded disappearances. A shiver danced down my spine. These weren't just local legends. The storm subsided the next morning, revealing a landscape shrouded in an unnatural mist. Against our better judgment, we decided to press on, the unsettling silence amplified by the oppressive fog. Hours passed, the dense forest swallowing the meager sunlight. The air grew thick and metallic, a smell I couldn't place but instinctively knew was wrong. Then, Maya, walking ahead, froze. Her eyes widened in terror. We followed her gaze to a clearing where a circle of crude totems, carved with disturbing symbols, stood under a gnarled oak tree. A single raven perched atop one of the totems, its obsidian eyes fixed on us. The air grew colder, and the silence became a physical presence, suffocating and heavy. Panic gnawed at me. We turned to flee, but the path behind us seemed to have vanished. Trapped, we huddled together, backs pressed against the rough bark of the oak. The raven cawed, a harsh sound that echoed through the oppressive silence. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the mist caught my eye. A figure emerged from the swirling fog, tall and gaunt, its face obscured by a tattered hood. Luminous blue eyes, like malevolent embers, glowed from beneath the hood. It moved with an unnatural grace, its long, skeletal arms trailing wisps of mist. A blood-curdling shriek tore from my throat, a primal cry of fear. The creature lunged, its raspy voice rasping words in an unknown tongue. Maya shoved me aside, a fierce protectiveness replacing her usual stoicism. She lunged at the creature, a desperate, instinctive fight for survival. Then, in a flash of blue light, Maya vanished. Gone. Just like that. Terror paralyzed me. Ben, his camera dangling uselessly by his side, whimpered in fear. The creature turned its glowing eyes on him, its cold laughter echoing through the clearing. Ben crumpled to the ground, a vacant look in his eyes. I was alone. The creature stalked towards me, its every step resonating with an unnatural power. Just as it reached for me, the earth shuddered. A deafening crack echoed through the forest, followed by a massive landslide. The cliff face gave way, sending the ranger cabin tumbling down into the abyss below. I scrambled back, the creature momentarily distracted by the falling debris. The opportunity was fleeting, but it was all I had. With a burst of adrenaline, I turned and ran, the creature's enraged shrieks chasing me through the swirling mist. I pushed myself beyond my limits, the forest a blur of branches and undergrowth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled out of the trees, collapsing onto the familiar gravel of the main road. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, star-studded sky. Looking back, I saw nothing but dense forest, the ranger cabin and the horrors within it swallowed by the earth. Back in civilization, the nightmares began. The blue-eyed creature, the chilling silence, Maya and Ben's vacant faces, they haunted my sleep. Some things, the journal had warned, can't be unseen. The experience left me a changed person. The woods, once a source of solace and adventure, became a symbol of terror. Blackwood Forest held its secrets close, but the memory of the blue-eyed creature and the bone-chilling silence remained a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks within the heart of nature. A darkness I barely escaped with my life. The rusted mailbox at the end of the dusty road mocked me with its faded inscription, Camp Tranquility. Tranquility was the last thing I expected, venturing into the uncharted wilderness of Redwood National Park with only a flimsy tent and a flickering hope of escaping the city's suffocating summer heat. My companions, Alex and Sarah, a young couple known for their adventurous spirit, shared my optimism, their laughter echoing through the silent trees as we unloaded our gear. The towering redwoods cast long, skeletal shadows on the forest floor, the air thick with the musky scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. An unsettling quiet hung in the air, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. We set up camp by a gurgling stream, the sound of rushing water a comforting counterpoint to the oppressive silence. As dusk settled, an unnatural chill crept into the air. The flickering firelight cast grotesque shapes on the trunks of the redwoods, and the wind seemed to whisper secrets through their ancient boughs. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't shake. Ignoring it, we huddled around the fire, sharing stories and laughter, desperately trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by nightmares of unseen eyes watching from the darkness and the chilling whisper of my name on the wind. Dawn brought little relief. The air crackled with a static electricity that made my hair stand on end. As we explored the surrounding woods, a sense of dread grew with every step. The silence was deeper here, broken only by the unsettling snap of twigs under unseen weight and the rustle of leaves in a non-existent breeze. Then, Alex stumbled upon it. A clearing dominated by a lone, withered oak, its branches twisted and gnarled like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. Beneath its gnarled roots lay a pile of bleached animal bones, picked clean and arranged in a macabre circle. Disgust mingled with a growing sense of fear. We fled the clearing, the image of the bone circle seared into our minds. That night, the whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices speaking in an unknown language. Fear kept us huddled together in the tent, the thin nylon a flimsy barrier against the unseen threat. Then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. Sarah. We stumbled out of the tent to find it empty, Sarah's belongings scattered on the damp ground. Panic seized us. We called her name, our voices swallowed by the oppressive silence. Desperate and terrified, we fled deeper into the forest, the whispers chasing us like a pack of hungry wolves. Every rustle of leaves sent us scrambling for cover. Exhausted and lost, we stumbled upon a decrepit cabin, its windows dark and vacant. Hope, desperate and fragile, flickered within us. We hammered on the weathered door, a silent plea for help. Moments later, a wizened old woman with eyes like chips of obsidian opened the door. Her gaze swept over us, cold and calculating. Despite our fear, she begrudgingly allowed us inside. The woman, who introduced herself as Alara, spoke of the Whispering Woods, an ancient place cursed with restless spirits. The bone circle, she revealed, was a dark offering meant to appease them. She warned us that leaving was not an option, for the spirits would claim any who dared to escape their domain. Trapped and terrified, we spent the next few days cowering in the cabin. Alara provided meager rations, her silence heavy with secrets. One night, while Alara slept, we discovered a hidden room filled with ancient grimoires and strange symbols etched on the walls. A single sentence scratched onto a dusty tome sent chills down my spine: the offering must be renewed. The horrifying implication hung heavy in the air. Was Sarah sacrificed to appease the spirits? Dread gnawed at me. We confronted Alara, her calm facade cracking for a fleeting moment, revealing a flicker of fear in her obsidian eyes. She confirmed our suspicions. Sarah's life force was the latest offering, temporarily silencing the whispers. Desperate to escape this horrifying nightmare, we devised a plan. Using the knowledge gleaned from the hidden room, we gathered the necessary ingredients for a counter-ritual, a desperate gamble to appease the restless spirits and break the curse. Under the pale light of a full moon, we performed the ritual in the clearing beneath the withered oak. The air crackled with unseen energy, the whispers reaching a crescendo before abruptly falling silent. As dawn broke, casting a pale light on the clearing, a sense of relief washed over us. Alara, her face etched with fear and a grudging respect, confirmed the curse was lifted. We left the Whispering Woods behind, the towering redwoods seeming less oppressive now, merely silent sentinels to the horrors we'd witnessed. Reaching the park entrance felt like a triumph, the bustling tourist center a stark contrast to the chilling silence we'd endured. Reporting Sarah's disappearance to the authorities was a painful charade. They treated it as a typical lost hiker case, their skepticism a bitter pill to swallow. Back in the city, the familiar sounds and sights felt strange, almost artificial. My dreams remained haunted by whispers and the image of the bone circle. Alex and I drifted apart, the shared trauma driving a wedge between us. He returned to his life, haunted yet trying to move forward. I, however, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Months later, a package arrived at my doorstep. Inside, wrapped in faded newspaper, lay a single bleached animal skull. Panic clawed at my throat. Taped to the skull was a single piece of paper, scrawled with a message in the same strange symbols seen in Alara's cabin. Though I couldn't decipher the words, a chilling understanding settled upon me. The curse hadn't been fully broken. Something lingered in the Whispering Woods, a malevolent force that held onto a piece of me. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need for closure, I returned to Redwood National Park alone. Following cryptic notes I'd pieced together from the symbols in the hidden room, I ventured deeper into the forest than I ever had before. The silence was unnervingly familiar, broken only by the insistent chirping of unseen insects. Finally, I reached a hidden valley shrouded in an unnatural mist. In its center stood a towering obsidian monolith, its surface etched with the same symbols from the grimoires. As I approached, a low, guttural growl echoed through the valley, sending shivers down my spine. From the mist emerged Alara, her eyes no longer obsidian chips, but burning embers. "You shouldn't have returned," she rasped, her voice a chilling parody of its former gruffness. She spoke of the ancient entity trapped within the monolith, the source of the whispers, appeased but never truly satisfied. She explained that Sarah's offering had merely satiated its hunger temporarily. Now, it craved more. A terrifying realization dawned on me. Ilara wasn't a guardian, but a servant. She'd manipulated us, using Sarah as an offering and now aiming to use me. Panic fueled my resolve. Recalling the counter ritual, I channeled all my remaining strength, chanting the words etched on the dusty tome. The valley resonated with unseen energy, the monolith pulsating with a malevolent light. Ilara screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration. The light from the monolith intensified, then receded with a deafening crack. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Ilara was gone, seemingly consumed by the entity she served. Exhausted and shaken, I stumbled back out of the valley, leaving the Whispering Woods and its secrets behind for good. The experience forever altered me. I carry the memory of the whispers and the chilling touch of the supernatural like a permanent scar. While the nightmares have subsided, the knowledge that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed remains a constant reminder. And somewhere, deep within the heart of Redwood National Park, the silence may have returned, but the whispers, I fear, still linger, waiting for their next unsuspecting visitor.